Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're digging into a really big question. How are we actually doing as a species? We're going to look past all the noise, the daily headlines, the complicated economic charts, to try and get a clearer picture of human progress over the last 30 years. So, let's jump right in.
First things first, I want to pose a question. We hear about a country's GDP all the time, right? Its economic output. But does having a huge economy automatically mean life is better for the people living there? Is wealth the same thing as well-being? Well, it turns out the story is way more complex than that.
So, if we want to measure success in a broader way, we need a better tool, and that's where something called the Human Development Index, or HDI, comes in. You can think of it like a country's grade point average, but for the well-being of its people. Instead of just looking at money, it looks at three really basic things. First, are people living long, healthy lives? Second, do they have access to education and knowledge? And third, do they have a decent standard of living? It gives us this much richer, more, human-centered view of what makes a country truly successful.
So here's how we're going to break it all down today. We'll start with the big picture, the 30,000-foot view. Then, we'll zoom in on the scoreboard to see how individual countries are doing. After that, we'll take a look at the different journeys regions are on around the globe. And finally, we'll pull it all together and figure out what it all means.
Okay, first up, let's look at the entire world. As one global community, are we moving forward or are we sliding backward?
Just look at this timeline. It tells a really powerful story. Since 1990, the world's average Human Development Index has been on this incredibly clear and steady climb. We went from just over 0.6 in 1990 to over 0.75 today. It just goes to show, despite all the crises and challenges we hear about constantly, the overall trend for humanity has been one of real, significant progress.
Let's just focus on that last number for a second, 0.756. That's our planet's average grade right now. And what it means is that the average person alive today is healthier, more educated, and has a higher standard of living than at any other point in human history. That's a pretty powerful and optimistic place to start, right?
But of course, a global average can be a little misleading. It can hide a huge range of different experiences. So for our next section, let's zoom right in on that development scoreboard and look at how individual countries are stacking up.
Now, at the very top of the leaderboard, we see some pretty familiar names. No surprises here. Countries like Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland consistently post the highest scores for human development in the world. They really set the benchmark for what's possible when it comes to health, education, and living standards.
But, staying at the top is one thing. What's often way more dramatic and way more interesting is the journey some countries have taken to climb up the ranks, and sometimes the tragic stories of those who have fallen behind. The real action is in the movement.
Look at these incredible climbers since just 2015 alone. Guyana has shot up an amazing 33 spots. That's largely thanks to its recent oil boom, which is totally transforming its economy. Then you have the United Arab Emirates climbing 27 spots. That's the result of decades of really strategic investment. These numbers, they represent rapid, life-changing improvements for millions of people.
But on the other side of that coin, we see a harsh reality. Progress is fragile. It can absolutely be reversed. Venezuela has suffered a devastating drop of 37 ranks. It's just a stark reminder of how political and economic crises can completely unravel years, even decades of development. It proves that progress is never a one-way street.
And you just can't talk about dramatic change without talking about China. Its rise of 16 ranks since 2015 is just the latest chapter in what is honestly one of the most massive development stories in all of human history, lifting hundreds of millions of people into better health and education.
Okay, so we've seen the big global trend, and we've dug into the stories of individual nations. Now let's zoom out just a little bit to a regional perspective, because you start to see how different parts of the world are charting very, very different courses.
This chart really highlights just how uneven that pace of progress is. Take a look at the bar for South Asia. It's showing growth of over 1% per year, on average. Now compare that to Latin America and the Caribbean. Their bar shows progress has been moving at less than half that speed. That's a huge difference.
So, what this really tells us is pretty profound. Your opportunities in life, everything from your healthcare to your education to your economic security, are still massively influenced by the part of the world you happen to be born in. Geography is still, in many ways, destiny.
All right, we've looked at the world, at countries, and at entire regions. So let's bring it all home for our final section and ask the big question: what's the main takeaway from humanity's 30-year report card? If you remember just one single thing from all of this, please make it this. The data is absolutely clear. We have made incredible, tangible progress as a species. That is real. But, and this is a big but, that progress is not guaranteed, and it has not been shared equally by everyone.
So, to quickly recap our journey, we started by seeing that, on the whole, the world is better off than ever. Then we saw that within that average, some countries have made these spectacular leaps forward, while others have tragically slid back. And finally, we saw how these trends cluster together, with different continents moving at completely different speeds.
And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty big question. The progress we've been tracking happened during a very specific period of history. But now, as we face a whole new set of global challenges, from climate change and pandemics to widespread political instability, what will the next 30 years look like? Will we keep this upward trend going, or will our progress begin to stall? The next report card, well, that's up to all of us to write.